Hello again, everybody. This is Dan Clouser, and welcome back to the Journey of My Mother's Son podcast. Today I'm joined with Chris Donaldson, who's the author of the book, Going the Wrong Way. And we'll get into that here shortly. When I kind of looked up Chris's background here, I felt like we were a little bit of kindred spirits. We're traveling the U.S. in an RV. He was doing that before RVing was cool, on a motorcycle, going across Europe and everywhere in between, South Africa. And I just, reading your background, I was like, this is definitely a guy I wanted to get on the show and talk to and share some stories with. So Chris, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So, you were 21 years old and decided to hop on a motorcycle, starting out in Belfast with the hopes of ending up in Australia eventually. So what was kind of the inspiration for a 21-year-old kid in the late 70s to just hop on a motorcycle and ride?
Well, when I think back on it, it's probably the other way to look at it is, well, why would a 21-year-old living in Belfast in the 70s not want to get out and go to Australia? It's probably more the means that I was going to do was just the odd thing. But I do remember reading about it, somebody doing it in a 175 PSA Bantam, as a lady did it in the 60s, and I thought it caught my imagination. And there's some things too, when you're in your teens, something just triggers out something in your brain and it sticks. So it was something I just had my mind focused on. Once I finished university, was what I wanted to do. So during my teen years, I worked every Saturday in the evenings whenever I could to save enough money. Bought myself a Moto Guzzi Le Mans, which was the hottest bike around in those days, and saved up, got ready to leave in 1979. I don't know if you know your history of the Middle East, but I left in October 1979, and I think it was the 4th or 5th of November 1979. The American embassy got taken over in Iran, in Tehran. I just left, and I got to London at that stage. Had all my plans written out. I've got the countries I was going to go to, my visas, and everything was ready. And all of a sudden, I couldn't go. It was November, and I wasn't going to go back again because I sort of said goodbye to everybody, see you in a year's time.
Right.
And it was coming into winter, so the only way I could go was south. Hence the name Going the Wrong Way, because from the day I left London, it was really a totally unplanned journey because all the planning was always out the window.
Right. So again, I know in your book you talk a little bit about the benefits of kind of being 21 years old and not really knowing any better, with some of the decisions that you made along that journey. So when you were kind of first thrown that first curveball, where you had these plans, now all of a sudden they were up in the air. As a 21-year-old kid, it doesn't seem like it really phased you. You just kind of rolled with it and said, all right, well, this is what we're going to do now.
Yeah, I mean, it was the first, I suppose, meaningful event on the trip that had a sort of momentum on me, because I had to make a decision which is going to affect possibly the rest of my life, or certainly the next year. And it was, sometimes you have to be forced to make a decision. Sometimes people have a decision to make, to put it off, and prevaricate. But winter was coming in Europe. Couldn't go east to Russia, and there was only one way to go, which was south. So I was certainly forced into making that decision. And I've been forced into making a lot of decisions since then. But I don't know, when you're 21, you're maybe more flexible, more able to change your mind and change. People as they get older, I think, get more fixed and unable to make to change direction like that.
Yeah. So obviously you've got thousands of stories of the experiences and people you met, throughout that journey. But what was one of the things that most surprised you, as you experienced these different cultures and met these different people, riding your bike down there?
Probably it's a bit of a sort of, sounds a bit sick to say, or it's silly, but probably how nice everybody was that I would meet along the way. I mean, you certainly met people that were out to get you and trying to put you off, but generally the people you met along the way were fascinating and very kind, and wanted to get involved in helping me on the journey as such. I ended up going to South Africa, which was in the middle of apartheid at that time. So it wasn't the best place to be. On the way, I went through the Middle East, went through Israel, Jordan, Syria, and Egypt, which were, so Israel was in the throes in between the various wars that they were having in the 70s and 80s. Africa itself was in turmoil. Uganda was it's been liberated from Idi Amin. Rhodesia was changing from into Zimbabwe. There were terrorists running around there. So there's a lot of trouble and strife in the world going on. But generally, the amazing thing, no matter where I went, there was people to help you and support you and feed you and help you on your way. I'll help you on your way. I think sometimes people in the West feel that we're the nice people in the world. We look after people, we're kind and generous and so on. But actually, some of the poorest countries in the world are where you get the most hospitality.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I know, again, our journey has, been, strictly to the US so far, but that's one of the things that we've found as well, is that, the kindness of people, even though today our world is, a bit of a mess as well. If you look for kindness, you can find it. And, we've noticed that along our ways. We've met some really amazing people, who are willing to help out and willing to lend a hand. And that's, one of the coolest things about, what we're doing today. So, was there ever a point along your journey where you wanted to turn back, where you wanted to say, you know what, things are just a little too crazy. I don't know that I want to be, going through Palestine, this time of the, was there ever a point where like, you know what, we should just head back to Ireland?
Lots of times. most days in Africa were a bit like that. But the trouble was, once I got to Egypt and started crossing the Sahara, there really was no way back, because I would have had to go through all that stuff again. It was one of the problems in the 79 was there's a lot of enduro and off-road motorcycles these days. It's quite fashionable to have these big motorbikes that'll go anywhere. But in 79, the Paris-Dakar race had just started, so people were just going off on road bikes. So I had to cross the desert on a Moto Guzzi, which is totally unequipped for that sort of terrain. So once I got that far, I just couldn't go back, because I just didn't want to go through that again, But certainly in Africa, Sudan, Uganda, there were scary places, and plenty of times you wanted to go back, and you were out on your own. You were on a limb, and you were very much relying on the kindness and support of other people. And sometimes just putting yourself into that position brings out the best in other people, but brings out the best in yourself as well, I think.
Right. Yeah. And I know you talked about, the motorcycle you had was not equipped to ride across the desert. And I know there's a part in your book where you talk about someone told you about letting the air out of your tires, so that it could actually handle the desert better than what it was doing. And again, you were some that never had really crossed your mind at the time. So, how many other instances were there like that where, someone helped you out with a piece of information and it was just like, never in my life would have I, thought that that's the way I should do this?
Yeah. Well, that was probably one of the main ones. I mean, there's a lot of other times I had to fix the motorcycle myself, and without any spare parts. I got to Uganda, and the front suspension had taken such a hammering. The only thing holding the front wheel on was the brake pipes. The whole shock absorbing system was broken. So I ended up had to manufacture a suspension system, or a shock absorbing system out of nylon rope to stop the front wheel coming off. So things like that, necessity is a great form of invention, you know. And actually, once I got it working right, it actually worked very well. And I was able to use it for most of the trip. It did the same job as the hydraulic suspension was going to do, just using the spring and a nylon rope. So necessity is a great help in these things. I suppose I was very fortunate in other ways. I tend to think I'm a lucky sort of guy in some ways. I got to South Africa, as I say, in the middle of apartheid. There were sanctions. There wasn't much traffic going through. There wasn't much ships or airlines going through. But I was able to get a job on a sailing yacht coming back to Europe and got the bike shipped over to the States. So I was able to continue the trip just by sheer luck that happened to be, maybe that was the only week of that year that would have happened, you know.
Right.
I'm sure you find the same thing in your trips. You arrive somewhere and it just happens to be sheer luck that something goes the right way, or on the other hand, it goes the wrong way as well, of course.
Right.
I like to think I'm a lucky sort of guy. So far, so good. It's gone the right way along my travels.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny where, like you said, going the wrong way as many times in your case has turned out to be the right way for you after all. I mean, what are, how, doing that trip so young, and the trips that followed it, how did that help you going into your adult life and going into business? How did those experiences help you, be successful?
I think it taught me if you want to get something done, or if you want something enough, you have to learn how to do it yourself and get yourself out of that situation. It was the main thing that sort of learned being on your own. I mean, traveling with other people as well sometimes, but really at the end of the day, it was up to myself to get myself out of that situation that I got myself into, or to stop going into a situation that I could see looming ahead, to find another route, to find another direction, to take advantage of another circumstance. So it taught me problem solving, and it taught me that there always is a way to get out of a situation, no matter how much trouble you're in. Maybe you have to take a while to do it. Maybe you have to go back to your roots, go back to where you started from, with whatever, to think of another solution to the problem.
Yeah.
But and we were talking about not having internet, not having GPS, not having mobile phones in those days. I think that, again, cut you off, but it meant you couldn't see so far ahead. You couldn't plan everything the way people plan things today. You can drive across the world now. You can plan every hotel and Booking.com and Airbnb. You know where you're going to be, how many miles, and you can actually see the road in Google Maps, which kind of spoils it a bit, because it takes away what's around the corner. You know what's going to happen tomorrow, which I think is what is missing in a lot of life these days.
Yeah. Are there with that thought in mind, are there any times now where you travel and you just drive, you don't set the GPS, and you just see where the road takes you, just to bring back that, which way is the road going to turn feeling that you had back then?
Well, that's a difficult one, because as you said, rode down to South Africa, took a sailing boat up to Europe, and went over to the States, went up to Canada, down the East Coast, and down to South America, down through Central, and down to Argentina. So I ended up going everywhere bar Australia. And then last year, after I wrote the book, somebody suggested I try and get to Australia again. So we've actually, in stages, we've got a wife and family now. I'm going to take 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, or 2 months off. And I'm traveling across Asia at the minute in stages. The bike currently is in Pakistan. I've just crossed Iran. And I can very exactly see compare the two, doing it with and doing it without a GPS, for instance. But there does it's a certain amount of masochism, I think, or sadomasochism, if you know you've got something available in front of you, to find out where you're going and you turn it off. You get that experience of, where am I again? But you'll also get the experience of what a stupid idiot you are. Because you got
Yeah,
yourself
I
wrong.
had this tool and I'm not using it.
Yeah. So it's a tricky one. I haven't worked that one out myself. You need to ask me that one next year to get the answer to that one. But so far, I am using the GPS whenever I can.
Yeah,
For instance, arriving in a city, you don't know your way around. I mean, I've arrived in, whatever, Johannesburg or Los Angeles, different country. You do, if you haven't got GPS in the old days, you picked up a certain directional skill. I think an instinct of where to go and how to get there. And I do wonder now. Nobody tries to find anywhere on their own. You just put it into your phone and put it into your GPS. And I think people will lose the skill of sense of direction,
yeah,
which older people like, don't know what age you are, but you're a similar vintage myself. Possibly it's you were brought up trying to find your way to somewhere. You don't have that experience now. So I think in 20 years' time, I wonder, are people going to have any idea of where they go if the technology does break down?
right, right. Are they going to remember that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west?
Yeah.
As a guide.
You're not going to be able to move the car unless that speaker tells them where to go. Turn left, turn right. They're not going to know what to do.
Uh,
But time will tell on that one too.
yeah, yeah, no doubt about it. So what, I mean, geez, almost what, 40 years after you did that, you decided to write the book. Were you journaling while you were doing it, or when you wrote the book, was it all just, digging into these, past memories?
No, I did actually journal. I thought I knew at the time it had to be the basis of a book, so I had taken quite a few notes. Excuse me. And in fact, I'd actually started writing a book. I got as far as sort of halfway through a manuscript. It was about 1981 or whatever when I got back. And one of my mates called the door one time with this book by a guy called Ted Simon, who just done the journey that I'd done, only further. He was a journalist, so he was a professional writer. I read the book and it was an excellent book, and I thought, I'm never going to be able to write as well as that. So I gave up. And it only took me 40 years later before I realized, well, my story was very much a different story from his, because he was 45 when he did the trip, whereas I was only 21. So everything I did was completely different, viewed completely different eyes. So I tried to write the story using my notes as much as possible. I always use my notes, but looking through, it was very interesting from a personal experience to read my notes as a 21-year-old being 60, to think back of what I thought in those days and look at photographs. And it was quite surprising how things came back, things I'd forgotten about years ago. But whenever you read the notes, looked at the pictures, started writing it down, it was like scraping back layers of paint in my brain. And the memories are all came not flooding back, but it was amazing what did resurrect itself. And I was able to, it was quite a momentous time in my life, I suppose. So I was able to recollect everything quite well. Couldn't recollect what people said or that sort of thing, but I
Right.
knew how I felt and what happened and so on and so forth. So I think it got a pretty exact feel to the book from that point of view, written as a and from reading the reviews, I think people have enjoyed looking at it I've been able to give it more depth, looking at it as an older person who was asking questions when I was 21. Whereas now at 60, I either know the answer or I'll never know the answer to a lot of the questions I was asking. But at least I know, well, that's never going to happen. So I'm able to add a bit more depth to it that way. So it was interesting. Also, that I actually had the pleasure of meeting Ted Simon a couple of years ago as well.
Oh, that's cool.
He's 90 years old, and I've spent the weekend with him. And we chatted like old soldiers being in the same trenches, sort of thing, at a different time. So it was very nice to keep in touch with him too.
That's very cool.
It was very strange. We'd never met before. We would heard of each other, but we were able to meet and talk like old friends after 40 years.
Wow, that's amazing. And I think that's some of the things that, just that travel experience does for you. Sandy and I have been doing this almost 2 years now. And that's one of the things we like the most is, the people we've met, and then, we're able to now follow them on social media, and then, we'll see them a couple months down the road, and you just pick up exactly where you left off, and you start sharing stories of, oh, were you here? Were you here? And it's incredible. It really is how, you have that, kind of common denominator right off the bat. Is there anything that 60-year-old Chris would tell 21-year-old Chris today?
That's a good question. There's probably a lot of things that would 59-year-old Chris. Yeah, there's a lot of mistakes I've made along the way. I don't think I made too many mistakes on the trip. I've made a lot of mistakes since then. But whatever doesn't kill you does you no harm,
Yeah. Isn't that the truth? So do you think there would have been anything that 21-year-old Chris would have told 59 or 60-year-old Chris about making those mistakes?
Well, I think there is actually quite a bit to that, because I think when you're 21, in a way, you have a much more healthy outlook in life. 60-year-olds sort of think they're winding down. You're not able to do things. You're not fit. You're not able. You haven't the time. Whereas when you're 21, anything's possible.
Yeah.
And I've tried to bring that into the story a bit this time. The trip, I'm calling this one Adventure Before Dementia, which is to try and sort of jog some of my older comrades to get off their asses and do things rather than just sit and mind the garden and play golf. There's a whole world out there, and there's no reason at 60 or 70 you can't go off into it. Ted Simon did He Rode Around the World when he was 79. I'm heading to Australia when I'm 64, hopefully get to the States as well. But as long as you're up and about, you should be able to do these things. And the main holdback when you're 21 is money. You don't have a background. You don't have enough money to do these things. You're skimping and saving and sleeping in ditches. So I've got a bit more. I've got a credit card now. So that's a big help, So there's advantages and disadvantages, but I think a 21-year-old with a positive mind can do a lot. It's mind over matter. Obviously, physically, you're fitter at that stage as well. But I think the mental attitude of a 21-year-old, if you can get your head around the problems, is much better. But let's say not much better. It's just different. It's different issues when you're 60 as you are when you're a teenager.
Yeah. And it's interesting what you said there about, as you get older. And we've met two older gentlemen who are traveling in their RVs now. One's a retired contractor. He's 79 years old, and he helps on volunteer projects, and he's out there working as hard as the 30-year-olds and the 40-year-olds and the 50-year-olds, many times doing circles around them. And I love talking to him because he's like, look, this is what keeps me going. This is what keeps me young. And another friend of ours who had full-time RV'd for about 20 years before his wife passed away, but we were out to visit him in Washington, and every day he was doing a new project, replacing a door on a carpool or whatever he was doing. And he said the same thing. He's like, my kids want me to slow down. He goes, but that's the last thing I want to do is slow down. So I think there's a lot of validity to the fact that, don't think about how much time you have, because we still have today. So let's do what we can do today and go from there. So I know we're just about out of, go ahead.
From a fitness point of view, there's the old saying, if you don't use it, you lose it. If you don't keep yourself fit, you won't be able to use it. But I think that works with your head as well, with your mind, with your brain, but also with your attitude. If you stop, the more closed you get your mind, like, I can't do that, I can't do that, I can't do that, then you'll talk yourself into not doing it, and you will be unable to do it. So it is a matter of pushing yourself into the unknown and maybe going the wrong way the odd time.
Yeah. So for any young kids out there today who might be thinking, like, I'm in the midst of a conversation with my one grandson who's going to be graduating high school next year, and I'm trying to convince him to not go directly into college for his freshman year, but to take a year off and travel a little bit. Because I think there's a lot that can be learned, in a gap year. And I don't think, every 18 or 19-year-old kid knows what they want to do for the rest of their lives. So why go and put yourself $100,000+ in debt, by going to college right away, go out and learn some things. What is your thought on that about, kids taking some time to go out and see the world a little bit before, making that decision to make a commitment to a 4-year college?
I'd be very strongly for that. Yeah, I think it's definitely between school and going to college, it's the best time to do it. Either that or just after you've been at college, which I did. The trouble with that is as soon as you get out of college, as you say, you're deep in debt. And all of a sudden, you got to get money, and every year you think, oh, I'm going to be deeper and deeper in debt. So once you finish your learning experience, you're on that money wheel. It's more pressure. The best time to do it is after school, and you haven't got the sniff of the dollars yet.
Right. And if you need a couple bucks, you can stop somewhere and work for a couple weeks or whatever.
You don't care what you're going to do at that stage. You'll take goals or whatever. So you'll never starve. And people are kind out there. You can survive in very little at that age.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So, Chris, how do people find you? I know the book's available on Amazon, but you're much deeper than the book. So tell people your website, how they can reach out to you, and where they can get the book and all that stuff.
Yeah, well, you can get the book and contact me, and my website is chrisdonaldson.world. That's my website. I can deliver anywhere in the world. I'm on Instagram, Chris Donaldson, or Going the Wrong Ways, and then Instagram, going the wrong way _book. My daughter's just reminded me. We need these things. I've got Facebook, Going the Wrong Way, and Chris Donaldson as well. So eBay, I don't know if I'm on eBay in the States, but certainly Amazon and the website are the best way to get hold of me. Either by contact me or send me an email. I'll come back to you.
Yeah, and the book's available in paperback, hardcover, and also Kindle and an audiobook, right?
Well, yeah, the audiobook's going really well. I got a young relation of mine who's a rock star, plays in the band. I decided I couldn't voice over my experiences as a 60-year-old for various reasons, which you'll find out if you read the book. So I got a young guy to do that, but it's getting some great reviews as well. But over 800 5-star reviews on Amazon, so it's getting a tremendous reaction.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I love it. So I know we're just about out of time here, so that brings us to our final question. The subtitle of the podcast is "Many Little People, Many Little Places," which comes from the opening lyrics of a Michael Franti song, Gloria, which go, "When many little people in many little places do many little things, and the whole world changes." So what's one of the little things that Chris does on a daily basis to make the world a little bit better place?
What do I do to make the world a better place? I think just being nice to people. As people have been nice to me as I've gone along the way. Treat everybody as a friend, and try and drop your guard, and assume that they're going to be nice back, and they usually are.
Yeah, I love that. Chris, I really appreciate you taking the time. Looking forward to, like I said, I was reading some of the book online. Looking forward to getting a copy and checking it out. The whole thing, like I said, there's definitely a connection there with some kindred spirits who like to get out and travel. Obviously, I'm not doing it on a motorcycle, and got my house right here with me, so I know where I'm sleeping every night and all that sort of stuff. But as I said, definitely wanted to connect with you, so I appreciate you taking the time. And for folks out there listening, be sure to check out my other podcasts and blogs at journeymymotherson.com or danclouser.com, and hop on over to Amazon and pick up the copy of my book, The Journey of My Mother's Son, and while you're there, pick up Chris's book as well. So, Chris, really appreciate the time.
Thanks very much. Talk to you soon.
You bet.
Bye.